Does ghosts really exist? 30 years ago, my answer would have been no. Although I was raised in a devout Buddhist family, I never believed ghosts existed. To me, death was simply the end. Ghosts and spirits, those were just stories people invented to frighten one another. Yet, in the end, I encountered a ghost, not just once, but twice. Both encounters were extraordinarily mysterious, and I was even able to communicate with the spirit. Those two encounters ultimately saved my life. More importantly, they helped me realize just how profound and inescapable the law of karma truly is. I'll tell you about the second encounter first rather than the first. You'll understand why after you've heard the story. The female ghost from the French colonial era. First, let me introduce myself. My name is TP, an unusual name, isn't it? That's because I am an ethnic Chinese person who grew up in Vienne. My family lived on Nan Street in BD Ward, VT City. On a sweltering summer night in the year 2000, the heat was so oppressive that sleep was impossible. Unable to rest, I got up, brewed myself a cup of coffee, and went outside to enjoy the night breeze. After only a few sips and less than half a cigarette, I suddenly heard a strange sound drifting from the distance. The sound gradually became clearer, echoing through the quiet summer night. It was the scream of a woman. The cry carried such unbearable agony that it sounded like someone being brutally tortured. I looked toward the direction of the sound. My heart nearly stopped. A young woman was running while screaming in terror. Above her head floated a wooden club, suspended in midair with no one holding it. Again and again, it smashed down onto her head. Each blow sent blood spraying as she shrieked in agony, clutching her head and writhing in pain. Good heavens! What is this? I've always considered myself a courageous man who had weathered many hardships in life. Yet even I trembled uncontrollably at such a horrifying sight. It didn't take long for me to realize she couldn't possibly be a living person. If she were human, after suffering such relentless blows, she would have died long ago. And that floating wooden club. There was no doubt, this was something supernatural. As frightened as I was, my curiosity was just as strong. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Finally, when the fear became overwhelming, I sat down cross-legged and began reciting the Buddha's name, a habit I had developed whenever I faced terrifying situations. After chanting for a while, I remembered a teaching from the Kayasaitagava Sutra. It says that when the living dedicate the merit of chanting sutras or reciting the Buddha's name to the deceased, the departed can receive a portion of that merit. That female ghost looked terrifying, but she was also deeply pitiful. I had no idea how long she had endured this horrific torture, but I couldn't bear the thought of it continuing even one moment longer. Why not try, I thought, so I began reciting the Buddha's name with even greater sincerity and concentration, wholeheartedly dedicating all the merit to helping the suffering spirit escape her torment. After what seemed like a very long time, it worked. The floating wooden club suddenly disappeared. The ghost stopped screaming, only faint moans of pain remained. It was astonishing. I had always known that reciting the Buddha's name was beneficial, but I had never imagined it could have such a powerful effect even within the unseen spiritual realm. Realizing the beating had stopped, the female ghost slowly stood up. She quickly understood what had happened. Then, she began walking toward me. Just as I was about to leap up and run, I suddenly heard a woman's voice, not through my ears, but directly inside my mind. To my amazement, we were communicating through thought alone. My curiosity suddenly overcame my fear, so I asked why she had been so brutally beaten over and over again. She looked at me with eyes filled with gratitude, silently thanking me. That expression eased my fear somewhat. Then she began telling her story. More than 100 years earlier, she had been the beloved daughter of an immensely wealthy landowning family. This was during the French colonial period. In those days, affluent families could legally purchase poor people to serve as household servants, who lived lives little different from slaves. Her family was no exception. Their estate was filled with servants of every age and gender, all expected to obey their masters without question. Spoiled by her parents from childhood and constantly attended by servants who catered to her every need, she grew up arrogant, contemptuous of others, and especially hot-tempered. As she matured, that temper developed into outright cruelty. The household servants naturally became the primary targets of her rage. Whenever someone displeased her, she immediately berated them. And after the insults came the beatings. Whatever stick, rod, or club happened to be nearby, she would seize it and strike without mercy. Worst of all, she particularly enjoyed striking people on the head. As a result, she became the servant's greatest nightmare. Not merely a figure of speech, a true nightmare. Some servants suffered such severe head injuries that they were permanently crippled. Others died on the spot. She showed no pity whatsoever. Those who died were simply ordered to be carried into the forest and left for wild animals to consume. During the French colonial era, powerful landlords often enjoyed protection from the colonial authorities. The deaths of servants rarely resulted in any punishment. Over time, such brutality became almost commonplace. Fortunately, that dark era of oppression finally came to an end after the August Revolution of 1945. At the age of 27, she married and moved into her husband's household. Back at her parents' estate, the servants quietly lit incense and offered heartfelt prayers of gratitude. Her wedding wasn't merely a joyful occasion for the two families. For the countless servants she left behind, it felt like deliverance. At last, peace had smiled upon them. Yet, not everyone managed to escape their fate. 1 year later, the young mistress returned to her parents' home for a visit, intending to stay for several days. Marriage had changed many things about her. Yet one habit remained completely unchanged: her love of striking people over the head with a stick. That day, she noticed a young servant sitting beneath a tree, resting. Seeing him seated instead of working, anger immediately flared inside her.
Trying to be lazy, are you?
Her blood boiled. She rushed toward him, shouting insults while raining blows upon him until he was dazed and defenseless. Seeing their mistress beating him with increasing fury, several nearby servants gathered the courage to plead with her. They explained that the young man was not lazy at all. He was suffering from a severe fever that day and had become too weak to continue working, so he had only sat down briefly to recover. But their pleas only fueled her rage. Once consumed by anger, she had no interest in listening to explanations, especially not from servants whom she regarded as beneath her. Her eyes darted around in search of something. Almost immediately, she spotted a sturdy wooden club lying nearby. She rushed over and grabbed it. Gripping the club tightly with both hands, she charged straight toward the unfortunate servant. Then she swung with all the strength and reckless fury of youth. Thud, thud, each blow landed squarely upon his head. Not a single strike missed. Nearby servants collapsed to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. They watched helplessly as one of their own was brutally beaten. No one dared intervene. Anyone who tried would simply become another victim. After venting her anger to her satisfaction, the young mistress casually tossed the wooden club aside and stood there, breathing heavily. One servant cautiously approached the motionless victim. The young man's hair was soaked with blood. After checking him, the servant realized that the poor young man had already died. There was no funeral, no proper burial. At most, a few silent tears rolled down the cheeks of fellow servants before they hurriedly wiped him away with their sleeves. As for the young mistress, her earlier frenzy had completely vanished. She calmly ordered several servants to carry the body into the forest and abandon it there for wild animals to devour. Then she simply walked away and continued with the rest of her day, as though she had done nothing more significant than swat a mosquito. That evening, the weather remained unbearably hot. She wandered into the family garden to enjoy the cool night breeze. The garden was dark, there were no lanterns, but she knew every path there since childhood and felt perfectly at ease. She sat quietly, reminiscing about happy childhood memories. She had never felt more relaxed. Suddenly, crack, a tremendous blow exploded across her head. Her vision blurred. The world spun violently. Crack, crack. Several more crushing blows followed in rapid succession. It felt as though her skull had shattered into countless pieces. Everything instantly went black. Her spirit left her body. Hovering above the scene, she looked down and saw her own father. In his hands was the very same wooden club she had used earlier that day to beat the servant to death. It turned out that, bothered by the oppressive heat, her father had also come into the garden for some fresh air. From a distance, he noticed someone moving in the darkness. Immediately he assumed it was a thief sneaking into the estate. Lately, thefts had become increasingly common, greatly irritating him. Now, thinking he had caught one red-handed, he quietly crouched down and searched the ground with his hands. Soon enough, he found a sturdy wooden club. Slowly and silently, he crept toward the shadowy figure. Squinting carefully, he judged the distance. Then, crack, crack, he brought the club crashing down upon the supposed thief's head several times in rapid succession. Every strike landed perfectly. The thief collapsed without a sound. Satisfied, he called for servants to bring lanterns. Only when the light illuminated the victim's face did he realize that the person lying before him was not a thief at all, but his own beloved daughter. The old man collapsed unconscious on the spot. All around him erupted chaos, servants shouting, people running in every direction, footsteps pounding across the courtyard, stretchers being carried, voices crying out in panic. At this point, the female ghost stopped speaking. She lowered her head and sobbed quietly. Then suddenly, she let out a scream so agonizing that it seemed to contain more than a century of accumulated suffering. She sprang to her feet and disappeared into the silent night. I remained frozen, staring at the place where she had vanished. My heart was overwhelmed with emotions that words could scarcely describe. That entire night, I never slept. Not because I was afraid, but because thoughts about human life and karma continued flooding my mind, impossible to suppress. When people become consumed by anger, they naturally seek an outlet. They yell, they strike the person who provoked them. In that moment, releasing their rage can feel incredibly satisfying. But how long does that satisfaction actually last? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's be generous and say half an hour. Then what? The feeling fades away. Soon it is forgotten. Yet few people stop to consider the consequences that remain. Sometimes the consequences come quickly. If you insult someone, they insult you back. If you assault someone, they may return later with friends seeking revenge. But those immediate consequences are only a tiny fraction of the true karmic retribution. Sometimes no consequences appear at all. At least not right away. That female ghost had once been a powerful young mistress. She beat servants to death whenever anger overtook her. During her lifetime, nothing happened to her. But just because a foolish person cannot see karma does not mean karma does not exist. Even dying with her skull smashed apart in that very lifetime was already a terrible karmic consequence. But her suffering did not end there. The law of karma does not merely repay a deed once. One cause may produce 1,000 results, 1,000,000 results, or even countless results. It is like planting a single seed. Given the right conditions, that one seed can eventually grow into an entire forest. That woman's spirit had been dead for more than a century, yet even now, she continued to endure the consequences of her actions. Second after second, minute after minute, an invisible wooden club relentlessly crushed her head without pause. The karmic punishment was remarkably similar to a story found in the Buddhist scriptures. The Buddha once spoke of a hungry ghost who suffered almost the same torment. While alive, that man had been highly skilled in martial arts and held great authority. Arrogant and abusive, he once hurled a stone that shattered the head of an accomplished monk who had already attained enlightenment. After dying, he fell into hell. When his sentence there ended, he was reborn as a hungry ghost. There, without anyone controlling it, his own karma manifested as a gigantic axe appearing in midair, repeatedly striking his head. Knowing this, the Buddha taught the following verse: "It is a great misfortune when power falls into the hands of a fool. All blessings are exhausted, leaving only the karma of a shattered head." Only now did I truly understand. The female ghost before me was suffering almost exactly the same karmic retribution. I made a rough calculation. If I wasn't mistaken, that floating wooden club struck her roughly 20 times every minute. That meant about 28,800 blows every day. Over 100 years, nearly 1 billion blows. The thought alone was horrifying. And that calculation assumed she had not first endured punishment in hell before becoming a hungry ghost. If she had, her suffering would have been even more unimaginable. Then another thought occurred to me. Suppose she had never encountered me that night. Suppose I had never dedicated the merit of my Buddha recitation to her. How much longer would this punishment have continued? How many more years? How many more centuries? All because she had wanted to satisfy a few fleeting moments of anger. Just 5 or 10 minutes of emotional release, which led her to plant terrible karmic causes, only to reap unimaginable suffering for generations afterward. Was it worth it? I don't think she believed it was. Otherwise, she would never have let out that heartbreaking scream before disappearing into the darkness. The law of karma is truly terrifying. How tragic it is for those who neither understand nor believe in cause and effect. Driven by anger, greed, and hatred, they recklessly commit harmful deeds. Only when karmic consequences finally arrive, do they realize it is already far too late. The ghost WHO repaid a kindness. Next, I'll tell you about the first time I encountered a ghost. It happened more than 30 years ago, yet every time I think back on it, my heart is filled with emotion. Most people associate ghosts with fear, but for me, this memory brings far more gratitude than terror. In 1990, I was 22 years old and made a living buying and selling timber. Not timber harvested from forests, but wood from fruit trees that their owners wanted cut down. Whenever someone wanted to remove a tree, I'd cut it down, haul the logs away, and sell them to sawmills. The work required traveling long distances and was physically demanding. It also required technical skill, so I hired 3 regular partners. Whenever I bought trees, I would call them to work with me. Over time, we became a close-knit team. Officially I was the boss, but in reality we got along like brothers. One day, the 4 of us traveled to LK, DN province, to purchase several mango trees. After cutting the trees down, night had already fallen. I left the logs there to be picked up by a truck the following morning. Once the payment was settled, the 4 of us climbed onto our 3 Honda 67 motorcycles and sped home through the darkness. The road was long and deserted, winding through endless orchards and fruit plantations. The surroundings were silent. While riding, something caught my eye. High in a tree hung a large, dark shape. Curious, I shouted to my companions. "Hey, stop, I think I just saw a bear up in that tree." One of them laughed. "Have you lost your mind? There aren't any bears around LK." Even so, all 4 of us turned back to investigate. As we approached and shined our flashlights upward, good heavens, it wasn't a bear at all. A man wearing a raincoat was hanging lifelessly from a tamarind tree. The other 3 screamed in panic and immediately fled into the darkness, leaving me alone beneath the hanging body. When there's good fortune, we share it together. But when disaster strikes, everyone looks after themselves. I sighed. Fortunately, I had always been unusually brave since childhood. The sight frightened me, but not enough to make me run. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I stepped forward, bowed respectfully toward the deceased several times, and quietly said, "Sir, we've never met before, yet fate has brought us together tonight. Unfortunately, it is only after your passing. My 3 companions have all run away, but I can at least report this to the local authorities so they can identify you and return you to your family for a proper funeral." I then went to notify the local police. They arrived, lowered the body, and found an identification card in his pocket. Using it, they were able to locate his home. I've always had a habit of getting involved whenever someone needed help, so I accompanied him to his house. When we arrived, the story became even more heartbreaking. He had a wife and 3 very young children, one of whom was disabled. The family lived in desperate poverty. I couldn't help wondering whether crushing hardship had driven him to take his own life. Seeing their circumstances, I simply couldn't walk away. I counted the money in my pocket. I had a little over 300,000 dong, a considerable amount in 1990. I immediately used it to buy a coffin. Then I removed the 2-tail gold ring from my finger and handed it to his wife to help pay for the funeral expenses of her unfortunate husband. Once everything had been taken care of, I returned home. I didn't think much about the incident afterward. I continued buying and selling timber as before. Only one strange thing happened. My business suddenly flourished. Everything I touched seemed to succeed. Luck followed me wherever I went. Several years later, someone introduced me to another opportunity to buy trees in TN. For that trip, I carried a substantial amount of cash for business transactions. I was also wearing a 3-tail gold necklace around my neck. As usual, I invited my 3 trusted partners to accompany me. After finishing the work and collecting payment, night had fallen once again. The homeowner kindly allowed us to stay overnight. Only he and his son lived there, so with everyone being men, they welcomed us without hesitation. Exhausted after a long day's work, I fell asleep almost as soon as I lay down. Sometime during the night, while sleeping soundly, I had an incredibly vivid dream. A stranger approached me and shouted urgently, "Wake up immediately. I've been following you all these years to repay the kindness you once showed me." Still confused, I asked, "Who are you?" He answered, "I'm the man who hanged himself in LK. Do you remember me now? Behind this house, they're sharpening machetes and knives. They're planning to kill you tonight and steal your money and gold. Right now, kick open that window. Then run straight east. You'll come to a small shrine where a Buddhist nun lives. That's the only way you'll survive. If you run any other direction, you'll be killed." The moment he finished speaking, I awoke. Immediately I heard footsteps approaching. They were only about 6 or 7 meters away. Without a second thought, I did exactly as the ghost had instructed. I kicked the window with all my strength. It wasn't very sturdy. One powerful kick sent it flying open. Driven by pure instinct, I grabbed my bag of money and sprinted outside. Straight east, just as he had told me. Behind me, several men suddenly burst into pursuit. I glanced over my shoulder. My heart nearly stopped. The pursuers weren't strangers. They were my 3 trusted partners. Each of them held a machete or large knife in his hands. In that instant, everything became clear. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I wasn't simply running, I was running for my life. The darkness worked in my favor. So did their surprise. They couldn't understand how I had somehow discovered their plan and escaped before they had even reached me. Within minutes, I had completely lost them. I kept running. Before long, just as the ghost had promised, I saw a small shrine. I quickly climbed over the fence and entered. Inside, a Buddhist nun was already awake, probably preparing for her early morning chanting. Seeing me burst in, she was understandably startled. Panting heavily, I told her everything that had happened and begged her to let me hide there. Fortunately, she believed my story. She said gently,
Stay here until daylight. It's already 4 o'clock in the morning. Leave after sunrise.
I thanked her sincerely and found a quiet corner to sit down. Only then did I have time to think through everything that had happened. How quickly human relationships can change. Only yesterday we had called each other brothers. Yet for the sake of money, they had been willing to murder me without hesitation. After that night, those 3 men disappeared forever. I never saw any of them again. When dawn arrived, I thanked the nun once more and returned directly to VT. The first thing I did after arriving home was open my cabinet. I took out 2 taels of gold and 1 million dong. Then I traveled to the home of the man who had hanged himself in LK years earlier. I told his family everything that had happened the previous night. Afterward, I gave the gold and money to his wife and children as a gesture of gratitude. Standing before his altar, I lit a stick of incense and prayed. The debt of gratitude between us has now been fully repaid. I helped your family after your passing. In return, you've protected me for years and ultimately saved my life. Our debts to one another are now settled. You no longer need to stay here watching over me. Please don't remain attached to this earthly world. May you move on peacefully and be reborn into a better existence. Since childhood, my family had practiced Buddhism. I had often heard the Buddha teach that there are 6 realms of rebirth: the heavenly realm, the asura realm, the human realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, and the hell realm. I had listened, but never truly believed. Only after this experience did I realize those teachings were real. I remain deeply grateful to that man. He not only saved my life, but also opened my eyes. He helped me understand that the Buddha's teachings were not empty words, and that this universe is inhabited by far more than just humans and animals. From that day on, I never encountered his spirit again. But my extraordinary experiences did not end there. If the opportunity arises, I will continue sharing my story with you. The next chapter is no longer about ghosts. Instead, it is about my own past lives. A remarkable karmic opportunity that allowed me to remember 7 previous incarnations, helping me answer every question I had ever had about life, about who I truly am, and about the workings of the law of cause and effect.